She'll rub up against you barely, and you have just another Ellie on your leg.
That's a very sheddable dog. They shed a lot, yeah.
This is true.
But I don't have any shedding on my dog.
Good morning.
Short haired.
Yeah, I do appreciate Luna. She doesn't shed very much at all. The other one sheds enough for 2 cats, though, so.
It evens it out.
Today is super short again, like yesterday. So if you want to stick around, because I'm also not doing anything after this, if you want to stick around and do your assignment here in person, you can, but you don't need to either. Just a reminder, there is no class tomorrow. So you can do your assignment tomorrow too if you want to. It's really up to you. Any questions about your assignment? So just a reminder, you're picking one image from chapter 1. It can be one we go over today. It could be one that we don't go over today. It's your choice to analyze it. Just like you analyzed the artwork yesterday.
Do you want it in the paragraph form?
This is just a discussion post. It doesn't even have to be very long. It can be short, brief, quick analysis, like a 5-minute analysis kind of thing. What?
2 words.
2 words. Maybe more than 2 words. But
Art history.
I'm just wanting this assignment to make sure you understand how to analyze an artwork, basically. This is just a check for understanding kind of thing. For me, to see if we need to keep practicing it as we go forward, or if we're good to move on to the next thing. Good morning. You're wearing your hair and your dress are like all my favorite colors. It's so aesthetically pleasing to me. Certain colors. So today we are, let's click forward, doing Paleolithic art, Neolithic art, and then at the end I'll remind you of the assignment again and you guys can work on it if you want to. Today, like I said, is a shorter day. There are a few videos interspersed throughout just because, well, you're going to see a lot of videos going forward throughout the class because I like getting multiple viewpoints of particularly architectural things instead of just a one-shot image, so we can get a better grasp of what things look like. So you will see a lot of videos today and the rest of the time just because I need that visual help sometimes to really comprehend things. And I'm pretty sure I'm probably not the only person. And some of the videos are actually pretty cool. So, of course, starting off with Paleolithic art, we're talking about the dawn of art. This is definitely a contested topic as to when exactly things started in art. Like, when do we consider things being art? If you remember in your art appreciation book, it's a very different time than what your art history textbook argues. So everyone has their own opinion for it. Your art appreciation book argues that it was around 70,000 BCE. Your art history textbook states it's around 30,000 BCE. So a big difference. And you could argue other times throughout as well, depending on what you're looking at and what you actually consider to be art versus craft or object. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. You are going to be seeing different stuff today than you would have seen in your art appreciation book. If you're remembering that, you will see some familiar objects as well. And we'll be talking a little bit more about them than we usually do today. We will be focusing a lot on composition choices today, which is something we don't usually get time to do in the other course. Some of the compositional choices that these Paleolithic and Neolithic artists chose are very interesting. And some of them are trends that will carry on for a very long time in art history. But the dawn of art, or the Paleolithic age, which, like it says there, translates to old stone, is, like I said, around 30,000 BCE. That is when humans first record images through paintings and drawings. That is when this textbook considers it to be the first artwork. Your art appreciation textbook considered the ochre stick to be the first artifact. It was a little piece of stone with geometric triangles carved onto it. This textbook thinks that it's paintings. Everyone has their own opinion though. So art historians do use these images and artifacts left behind to really understand a lot about these people. Are all of these ideas definite? No, just like when the beginning of art is, a lot of it's speculation. So we will be talking about a lot of things today that are just historians' opinions. Because we don't have any written texts from these people, we can't be definite as to the exact reasons why they did things. A lot of it's just people thinking that might be why they made the things they made and they did what they did. We're also going to be learning a great deal about their methods on creating art, as well as how they chose to illustrate things, like I mentioned, their compositional choices. So that's just your little introductory slide there, which was a bit in-depth. We'll be taking a little bit more time to look at that image in a moment. We're going to go in chronological order though today. That's not yet. So just a little background for human origins to give us an idea of where we're starting and where we're going to go. We're going to watch a little video and then I'll be asking you guys some questions. that's where we're going to stop because the cultural revolution or the agricultural revolution is what we're doing Monday. So if you're paying attention, you kind of have an idea of what we're going to be starting with and ending with today. So did anyone happen to catch where, according to your textbook, end of this video, humanity began? Africa, yes. Do it? Yeah. Yeah. So that is also where we are going to begin today. You'll notice too with the video, most of human species ended up inhabiting southern areas prior to northern. That has to do with climate. We will be talking about France today because there's a lot of cave art that exists there. But you will also have noticed that at one point, according to this video and many, many historical texts, I don't care if you agree or not, you're not going to offend me, all of the continents were once connected. So you'll see some of that translating over into the things that these Paleolithic artists illustrated. So keep that in mind. So a good chunk of early art is abstract, and a good chunk of what we learn about these people is from abstract imagery. What is abstract imagery? Any guesses?
Something like out.
So let me give you two examples. How many of you guys are familiar with what Greek classical sculpture looks like? Is that abstract imagery? No, what is it? Realistic. So with abstract imagery, you can have two kinds. There's representational abstract and there's non-representational abstract. Today we're going to be talking about representational abstract. That means these people were trying to illustrate something they saw, but they did not do so in an extremely realistic way. So if you're thinking of illustrating a human as a stick figure, that would be abstract imagery. If we're taking it down to its most basic form. And this guy is abstract imagery. So a good chunk of what we have from these people is abstract imagery. And just to give you an idea of what we mean when we're talking about people, that is a bit of skeletal remains from these early Neanderthals. You might notice that it does not look exactly human. So that's where we're starting. We're not starting with humans that look like humans. We're starting with Neanderthals that look a little bit more ape-like than human-like. And we are going to start with an object that was found nearby one of these skeletal remains. And I guess that I gotta click this. And that is the water-worn pebble. So here's our first artwork. It's a pebble. Would you exactly say this is art? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. That's a question I'm going to be posing to you guys in a moment. So this was a stone that was found near bones, like the bones you just saw. And you might notice that on this stone, there are indentations that kind of look like a face. This stone was from about 20 miles away in a riverbed. That's where the mineral deposits for the original stone were. Which means that this ancient person found this stone, most likely picked it up, noticed that it had human-like facial structure, and kept it and traveled with it. about 20 miles, where they ended up dying in a cave. Most people believe that the indentations were natural. They were not added later. Would you say this is art? There is no right or wrong answer, by the way. There really isn't.
And when the cave was actually discovered, and who discovered it, who declared it at the time, art, really.
Maybe. Anyone else?
Because it's supposed to be naturally made to look like that, I wouldn't consider it art because it wasn't modified. Basically, it just happened that way.
Right.
They start.
So, anyone else?
I think no, both yes and no, in terms of like,
Yeah.
I don't particularly see it as art,
Yeah.
but the person that wants it could have seen it as art.
Right. Anyone else? So, I am teaching an art appreciation class right before this. Yesterday, we talked about what is art, and art, the definition is like making something creative. But today we talked about the purposes of art, and one of the purposes is art for delight, art that's just enjoyable to look at. So things that are enjoyable to look at can fall under that category of art. So I would agree that it could be art, and it also could not be art. And it would depend on the context and how you're looking at it. It's a big argument, though, that a lot of art historians have. Now you're understanding why yesterday I said some people think some of the objects that we're going to be looking at are not art, and some people say they are. This is just the first example of many that we're going to be coming across.
Does it say exactly what type of stone it is?
Yeah, so it's a jasperite stone. I just
And,
need to move this, sorry.
and then that would depend on how easily it is to over time. And,
Yeah,
you know, make
right,
the
yeah.
marking like that.
yeah,
So either just, you know, it was natural
Right.
or if it wasn't.
yeah, because we can't exactly for certain say that this dude didn't, I think it's a dude, didn't pick it up and like make those indentations. There's no way for certain to tell. So of course, if they did make it themselves, that makes it more along the category of art, but we don't know for sure. So that's the idea of was it modified at all? It could have been, it could not have been. We can't tell because it's too old for us to tell. It is from around 3 million BCE, which is extraordinarily old. And it was found, like I said, right next to the dude that we just looked at. By the way, so these yellow bits are the actual bones that were found. The rest of it are the addition. So, yeah. It was not, however, until 30,000 BCE that we can really for certain say humans intentionally made art or like artifacts to leave us behind. With this one, we can't tell too well whether it was or not just because it's too old. That takes us to Apollo 11 cave in Africa. By the way, this was also in Africa, if you notice South Africa. So we are starting off obviously in Africa. In the cave structures where this was located in Namibia, there were many, many caves. This is just the one from the Apollo 11 cave. There were multiple stone tablet fragments found with abstract animal-like forms on them. All of the tablets were very small and portable, like you could take them with you. Some of the animals you can kind of tell it's supposed to be like a lion. Others, like this one, it's a little bit harder to figure out what exactly is being illustrated here. It is made of charcoal on stone, so just your basic found objects that they noticed would leave marks on stone that they could use easily. And if you notice looking at it, it is in a particular compositional style. So how did the artist choose to illustrate this animal? What do you think is interesting? Profile, yes, they used profile. A good chunk of the art and artifacts that we have from the Neolithic and Paleolithic era are profile view. That is because when an animal is in profile view, which is what most of these artifacts are as animals, you can see all of the defining characteristics of that animal. So if it's a bull, you can see horns. If it's a horse, you can see the snout and mane. You see what you need to see to be able to tell what that is. Unfortunately, here we can't tell what this is, but you can tell that they did try and illustrate it's an animal. But they did do something interesting with the profile. Normal profile view, you would just see one leg, but here they made sure to illustrate all four legs so that you could definitely tell this is supposed to be an animal, not a human. Yeah. You'll notice that a lot going forward. It's pretty characteristic for this time. The Egyptians will carry on with that idea of showing things that you need to see, as well as the Sumerians, and even the Greeks start off with that format of showing everything that you would need to show to illustrate what something is. And in case you're wondering how we get the approximate date on these objects, it's carbon dating the materials that were used on the objects. So for this one, they carbon dated the charcoal on it. And for anyone that's curious why there's a bunch of CAs in front of these, that just means approximate. It's short for circa, which is Latin for approximate. So approximately, this was made around 20,000 BCE. Do I need to explain like BCE or CE to anyone? BCE is before current era. CE is current era. That's like where we're at now. So just a little bit more into thinking about design compositions. Most artists, even artists back then, the guy that did the animal that we just looked at, you think about what your subject matter is, and then you think about how you're going to best represent that subject matter. And of course, with animals, more often than not, the best way to show it is more of a profile view that illustrates all of the parts that you need to see. For example, if that dude painted, or not painted, but drew this type of a shape on that stone tablet, people would be wondering what sort of animal humanoid figure is being depicted versus what animal figure is being depicted. So that's why artists choose what they choose. And if you painted this, we wouldn't know what that is. So there are reasons why artists do what they do. They choose how to best represent that subject. Even today, they contemplate how they're going to best represent the subject they're trying to portray. And of course, thinking about it, what are the two answers to the Paleolithic era art? Well, answer one would be to make sure if it's something with the horns, to show horns. Answer two would be make sure to show profile. And thank you, Trevor Watt, for having the only example of all four viewpoints. Well, I mean, there's another viewpoint, it's aerial, but that'd be really weird too. So our next image is from Western Europe. We're moving north now, and it's the Hohenstein Statue figure. This is a really interesting statue that a lot of textbooks leave out, and I'm glad your textbook included it because it's odd. It is a human with a lion's head. It is the earliest example of a human that we have in art history, but it's not entirely human. The Paleolithic people did not illustrate humans. If a human was shown, and the only two examples that we have from them, they have animal heads. They don't have human heads. So it's interesting that they chose to do that. Why they chose to do that is not for certain, but that's how they did it. And by human at this point, I'm talking about male humans. Later on, we will see a lot of examples of female figures. Females were the only human figures that they did frequently portray. Men don't come up. Sorry, Brandon. This is the man. He has a lion's head, which is kind of cool. This is a little cool. This is also the oldest sculpture that has been found that does not depict an animal in profile. All of the other sculptures found are illustrating an animal figure shape that is in profile view. This is entirely in the round. It is almost 12 inches tall, high, so quite large. And the medium used, because you guys for whatever reason can't see the bottom half because the screen isn't fitting right, is mammoth tusk. So this is a 12-inch long mammoth tusk that this was carved on. We won't see human figures or humanoid figures, particularly humanoid figures or male figures, again until the Mesopotamians and Egyptians being carved in sculptural format. So once again, this was done around 30,000 to 28,000 BCE, and we won't see this being done again for several thousand years. Like I said, this figure has been stumping historians and art historians for many generations now as to why this exists. We don't know why they chose to make a human lion person. You could even argue that it looks kind of like a lion that's just standing on its back feet. That would definitely be an easy argument to make. Why does it exist? We don't know. But it is neat, and you can easily tell versus the last image that we looked at that this is a lion. So art is improving and advancing. We can now understand what objects are being depicted. Obviously, it's not realistic, but it is abstract realism. That takes us to our female figures. We've seen this one before, I'm sure. No, I keep forgetting that one of you hasn't taken our appreciation. So this is new for you. Yay. Yeah, I've heard about this before. How exciting. This is the woman of Willendorf. She's named because she was found in Willendorf, Austria. So her location that she was found in. She used to be called Venus of Willendorf. A lot of art historians now just call her Nude Woman because they don't want to attribute her to a specific location, culture, or goddess, because we aren't for certain why exactly she was made. You'll notice the date is 28,000, 25,000 BCE roughly. We have no idea why people did the things they did back then. She is 4.5 inches tall, so fairly small. and carved onto limestone. A lot of people believe that the reason why she was carved in the shape that she is because that was the way the stone naturally occurred, and they just added the details to it to give her that shape. So we're talking about a stone that was probably curvy, and they just added those shapes to it. Limestone is a bit tougher to carve onto, so that would make sense, because we are talking about people that are just using stones to carve on stones. So you need something harder to carve on limestone. This, compared to our man with the lion head, is quite exceptional. So just to remind you, this one done the same exact time period as this one. Possibly. I mean, it's all approximate. What do you guys think about this one in comparison to the last figure? Better, worse, opinion?
I think it's a lot more, this is actual art. I mean, the other one, it could happen.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Why would you say this one's more art?
Well, because I've worked with the limestone.
Yeah.
That
So you say this takes more skill?
a lot of skill. I mean, it's actually amazing.
Yeah. Anyone else? They are. Yeah.
I think that just because there's a lot more detail in this one, and I must have used it, what is that made up there?
Right.
The other one, like, I'm sure it's hard to carve into a task, especially in the
Probably, yeah.
So they're both impressive, but this one must have like the dedication and time and skill. Like it wouldn't just be something they did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with all of those statements. Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't planning on asking that question, so I didn't know what to expect. I just decided to ask it all of a sudden because I was curious. So she is named after her find spot. That is a vocab word, find spot. A lot of objects are named after their find spot. That just means the location that they were discovered in. If you need a reminder of what a find spot is, it's pretty self-explanatory in the word. But yeah, I do try to also put your definitions or like vocabulary words in italics like your book does. So going forward, you should be able to spot them fairly easily in the PowerPoint. We don't know exactly why this one exists either, but there are a lot more theories that go along with this one just because she is more detailed, which gives us more ideas and more to work with to come up with ideas. So possibly for fertility purposes, just because of the objects that are paid particular attention to, the breasts and the pubic area in particular are highlighted there. And both of those are needed for fertility purposes. She was originally named Venus because they thought she was a female goddess from the time period. There were many of these female figures found that were fairly similar, large breasts, highlighted pubic region. So people thought maybe there was a fertility goddess that existed at that point in time, which wouldn't be surprising because a lot of cultures have that. But we can't be for sure, so they removed the title of Venus. And we are going to watch a little video on this one as well, so we can see her in her actual museum setting.
People love definitive answers. We really want to have a clear understanding of everything we see, art historians especially so. But people also love to make things. We love to make art. And one of the oldest works of art in the world, yet found, is a small female figurine that's sometimes simply called female nude, but is still universally known as the Venus of Willendorf, a name that makes no sense whatsoever, but really speaks to the lens that our culture looks through.
She acquired the name Venus when she was found in 1908 in a village in Austria called Willendorf. She's only about 11 centimeters high, and she dates from about 25,000 years ago. So she's really old. And in the museum in Vienna, where we're looking at her in the Natural History Museum, they've shrouded her in darkness in a glass case illuminated from above. The outside looks like a Greek temple, and on it, it says Venus of Willendorf.
And in fact, in the temple, there's a little button, because remember, this is a science museum, lots of kids, and kids love to push buttons. And when they do, the white light on the figurine turns red, and the little flute music starts. Now, of course, we have no idea if these people listen to music, what that music would have been. It's really an attempt to fill in all the gaps. We know almost nothing about her. We don't know why she was made, who made her. What we have is the figure and virtually no context. It is in some ways an anthropological object rather than an art object.
By giving her the name of an ancient Greek goddess, the goddess of love, Venus, we were assigning meaning to her, a meaning of her being a goddess figure and somehow associated with fertility.
Now, we have no reason to believe any of that is true. I suppose we do have a little bit more context, and that is, this is only one of quite a number of female figures that have been found from this era. This is during the last ice age, and it's some of the first figural sculpture that we've seen. What's interesting is that almost all of the sculptures that have been found have been female figures.
We should say all the figures that have been found so far are female figures, and they're nude, but they're of different shapes. Some exaggerate the breasts and buttocks, but others are thin. But maybe in 10 years or 100 years, art historians and archaeologists will find male figures.
So all of this is guesswork. All we've got to look at is the figure itself. Let's take a close look.
She has no feet and very thin arms, which she rests high up on her breast. And she has no facial features.
That's consistent with almost all of the figures from this period that have been found. There is a careful rendering of the hair, or perhaps a woven hat that's on her head. Some archaeologists have suggested that this might be a reed hat that she wears.
Oh, there's the music and the red light.
That's right, a small girl has just pushed the button. The hands are articulated ever so slightly, defining the fingers. And archaeologists who have looked at this carefully have suggested that perhaps the exaggeration of the stomach and of the breasts and of the head, the sort of bulbous shapes throughout, are partially a result of the natural shape of the stone. This is a limestone object. She's symmetrical, and it's clearly not something that was meant to stand up. As you mentioned, there were no feet, but this is a figure that would easily fill a hand. And you have the sense that this is something that was meant to be held.
Carried in a pocket, perhaps, something like that. She does fit comfortably in a hand. We know that she was originally painted with ochre paint, a kind of red paint. Beyond that, it's really hard to say much more.
So we'll continue to be fascinated by it. Art historians will continue to try to find answers. And in some ways, I'm sure we'll always fall into the trap of reflecting our own interests and our own needs as we try to understand this object. I'm not sure that we'll ever fully understand it or be able to retrieve its original meanings.
No.
So I always think that one's really interesting, just because despite the fact that we have tried to disassociate our own thought process onto objects, it's still being portrayed in that way, in a Greek temple with music and stuff, and that stuff wasn't around then. So it's an interesting choice on the museum's part. It does make it a lot more theatrical and grand, which draws in tourism, so that's probably the main reason why they did that. We will, going forward, look at a lot of other objects in the setting that the museum chose to display them in, because it's very interesting, the choices that museums make. Sometimes they make total sense, sometimes not so much. But we have to also remember that museums are institutions that exist as companies, basically. So they try to make decisions in their best interests, which I believe is exactly what this museum in Austria did. They made a decision that suited their best interests. So yeah, very interesting figure. As they said, there are many, many nude female figures that have been found. Maybe we'll find a male figure, but we have found a lot of animal figures. So yeah, this is Leituk Adalbert. So we are now in France, which means that we're going to get to listen to my non-existent French because I don't know that. These are really interesting, I feel like, just personally, because of the medium used. It is clay. It was natural clay. It was not fired clay, so it is just dried in the elements, and it's still there today. And if anyone knows anything about clay, if you get it wet again, it turns back into mush. So it's quite impressive that the medium that was used for this still exists today. Like this object is still here. So they chose a very good location inside of a cave complex to sculpt this. This is not a figure in the round like the two previous sculptures we've looked at. This is a high relief. It is attached to a background. The background is the cave floor. So the artist took big lumps of clay from outside and put it onto the floor and then shaped the clay with a smooth spatula or object into these two bison. They are very easy to understand as bison. Pretty easy to read. The cracks on these bison happened right after it dried. Because if you let clay naturally dry, it cracks a lot of times if you don't fire it. So those cracks are original technically. They did not happen over time. So that's also kind of interesting. This one I think is just really fun because of the medium. It's one of the rare examples of that we see, and it's the only example that you're going to see in this class. Another interesting choice is, of course, the composition. We see once again a profile view so that we can understand exactly what the subject matter is, which is one of the reasons why it's so easy to read as two bison. You'll also notice the size. They aren't that big. I mean, they're kind of big. 2 feet. Mm-hmm.
So that's on the floor.
Yeah, it's on the floor.
So
that stone in the background
pictures.
was like sticking up out of the cave floor.
Okay, so like.
And for this picture, they probably got on the floor to take it.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm. They're kind of like reddish too. Like if you have a really good light on it, the clay is a bit of a reddish toned clay.
I wonder if they were just digging for something, or if they were actually looking for clay. Because it's not usually something that.
Right, I know. Yeah, you have to dig for it.
But France has a lot of caves, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of water locations, so it might be a bit easier over there. Of course, I don't know what France was like in 15,000 BC yet. It's probably a bit different than today. Climate changes and all. But who knows if the clay was easy to find or not? We will never know. But yeah, France, there's a lot of areas of France that are moist. I know, that's the thing that surprises me, because I think that the moisture and humidity in certain areas might affect it. But if it's deep enough in the cave, then it wouldn't.
Yeah, and they were
Right.
moved out of the dry water.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially if it was like a piece of finding shelter, you wouldn't want to keep it.
right, yeah. Most of the cave paintings and artifacts that were found in caves were found very deep in the caves, which is why we found them, because the ones that might have ever existed towards the front, they aren't there anymore. Because the cave complex itself and the climate inside caves helps to preserve things a little bit better for us. So next is a small figure. It's another tusk-like object, a reindeer horn this time, of another bison. This one, however, is not your profile view. This is one of the few that are not in profile that we're going to be looking at. But most people think that the reason why this bison is not in profile view is because the artist was trying to work with the shape of the rock that they found. A lot of the art from Paleolithic era is working with the natural shape of the rock that they found, or the horn that they found, or the tusk that they found. So a lot of people believe that that was the reason for this interesting composition choice. So for this one, we have, instead of a profile view bison, a bison that is turning their neck around to lick their back. So we don't so much see the back side of the bison, but the artist instead took time to detail the head and the tongue, which is still there. It's right here.
And that's like, means so.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 4 inches, so
Yeah.
it would fit in your
That'd
hand.
be perfect.
So another object
Like
that would be
kids,
carried around.
True.
This one also probably a lot more detailed than these. These don't have like the hair and the eyes or anything like that. This one, they took time to really illustrate every single piece of fur here, and the tongue and the eyes and the horns and the ears and the nostrils. So there's a lot more detail with this one, despite it being a lot smaller.
Now it's time in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
You think?
In France, yes. La Madeleine cave. That takes us into our caves. Our first cave is Altamira. Altamira is the first one we're looking at. It is not the oldest cave. It was the first one discovered, though. And it was discovered in Altamira, Spain. And this is a detail of the ceiling. So on the ceiling, the artists have painted bison. Once again, this is our other example of bison being illustrated not in profile. These bison are illustrated from an aerial viewpoint. So as if they were laying on the ground and you were looking down at them. And they're once again on the ceiling, so that like opposite. So this was found in 1879 by a father and a daughter. They found it on their property. Lucky them. And it really sparked the beginnings of cave explorations. Other people in Europe started trying to find cave complexes to see if they could find this as well. A lot of people started faking finding things. So they would make these paintings on caves that they found and claimed that they found these. And then of course with carbon dating, they were proved to be fake. But people were trying to gain attention and money off of this new thing. So yeah, it really started that, and it did cause a lot of issues for archaeologists going forward. We'll talk about that later on a little bit more, but because of all the fakes, sometimes people didn't even believe the real ones because we got so used to seeing the fake ones. So once again, very interesting compositional choices done with powdered pigments that would have been found naturally occurring. Some of them are ground up rocks and stone. We'll talk about how they did things like this a bit more in a second as well. But yeah, aerial view. Some of them are in profile view like this one. But there's also the odd positioning of them laying down and looking down on them. Now, most of these would not have been done at the exact same time. These were done throughout a period of time by probably multiple people. And that's how cave paintings are. They aren't done all at one time by one person. They are done throughout a long period of time by many, many people. We believe that because they are not all exactly the same style and techniques used to make them. And that goes back to our talk yesterday that a lot of artists have their own specific techniques and styles that they like to do things. But as I said, this is not the oldest cave painting. This is just the first one found. We're going to see some older ones now. But first, how do they do this? How do they draw on ceilings? Because most of the cave paintings are really, really high up on the walls of caves and ceilings of caves. How would you do that? Well, first off, you find what color you want. You find chunks of pigmented ochre or other soft stones that you can grind up and make into a powder. You can mix the powder with water and create a paste-like substance. You can also get a hollowed out straw-like substance, like a reed, and blow the pigment onto the walls, which sounds fun. Sometimes they also use bones if they couldn't find reeds to spray on the pigments. We'll look at some really cool examples of that later on. People got their hands up there and took a bone with some pigments, and you see the negative of the hand left behind, and that's how they signed their artwork. So cool. Now, to get up on the ceilings, they made scaffolding. Yes, in the Paleolithic era, they had scaffolding. They would use young sapling trees and branches and craft scaffolding to reach up to the ceilings in the higher areas. We know that because the scaffolding in some places has been found. We've also found holes in the ceilings in which they might have suspended themselves from. Yeah, pretty ingenious for a really long time ago. So that's how they did these, in case you were curious. What do you think, well, why do you think they would make these cave paintings? Why? Why waste hours of your life making scaffolding, grinding up pigments, figuring out how to do these paintings in the first place, and then climbing your butt up to a ceiling to paint a bison? Why?
Depends on, well, it's saying it's around 13,000, 11,000 BC is not as advanced yet as saying in the civilization of art.
Yeah.
Because before we became smart.
So why do you think they did this in the first place? Like, why would you want to do this?
They didn't have anything.
They don't need to get food?
Well, they
Could have been for the food. If you're constantly traveling as Europeans, they're probably nomadic.
They were,
it
yeah.
might be that the cave paintings are being left there for other people who might wander in so that they know that this is
Possibly, yes.
It could be attributed to the bison because that's probably a very important food source. So kind of a way of honoring that.
Yeah. We don't really know exactly why they made it. It could have just been for kicks. A lot of the animals being depicted, funny enough though, were not their food sources. These people that made these bison, we have checked bones and mineral deposit species that has been left behind, and they did not eat bison. Bison existed there, yeah. Remember, one time, all of the continents were together. I know, this is just bizarre to us. But for whatever reason, they didn't eat the bison. I know, it's, yeah, so some people are thinking maybe it's something to do with religion, who knows? We will never know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't know. It could have been a rite of passage. We really don't know why they did it. But this is just an early cave painting. We're going to look at some others that kind of pose more questions than answers now. And we're going to start with Peckmerle. Peckmerle is the cave complex in which they signed a lot of their artwork with their handprints, and we'll see those. Well, you can kind of see them right here. Above these spotted horses are handprints. So in Peckmerle, most of these images were done with hollowed out bones and blown on powdered pigment, versus the last one was painted on powdered pigment, or not powdered pigment, but wet pigment. Similarly, these would have been like hand painted, very roughly done. However, instead of bisons, we have horses now. Many wonder why they have hands along with the horses. Like I said, a lot of people think that it might have been like, this is mine, like this is my horse. So they had the hands with them. But we do have the negative images of the hands, which is interesting. This one is, by the way, in France. A lot of the cave complexes that we're going to be looking at are from France. This one is 23,000 BC, so older than the last cave complex. But once again, we have a consistent style of a lot of profile animals, so that you can tell what's what. You can definitely tell that's a horse, even though it's a very abstract horse. Listen to Lascaux. Lascaux is most well known for its Hall of the Bulls, which is a very large open cavern inside of the Lascaux caves, which is decked out all over the ceiling with bulls. So a lot of people think that these bulls would have been done for rituals because it is in a very large empty cavern space, and some objects have been found there that indicate possibility for religious rituals or rites of passage rituals of some sort, like meeting gathering areas for people for important events. So a lot of archaeologists and historians believe these particular paintings would have been done to decorate that area. So a little bit more of a definite answer, and it's not a definite answer, but it's an answer. It's an answer, or a possible answer to things. We also have some twisting perspective used here. So twisting perspective is what we have here. Normally, when you have a profile view of a bull, which is what the rest of this image is, you won't be able to see both horns at the same time. What these artists did is they twisted the horns to the side so that you would see two horns. So you could definitely tell that was a bull, because bulls have two horns. You want to be able to tell it's a bull, you got to do two horns. That's very consistent with this time as well as future cultures, to do a twisted perspective image to make sure you could see what you needed to see to be able to tell what things are. You might also notice that things are more on a flat plane here versus some of the other, particularly I'm thinking this one. This one, they're all in different images. This one's laying down, this one's standing up. They aren't on one flat landscape line. It's not like they did them all like this. No, these are just all randomly around. This of bulls, there is more of a flat one level landscape going on. It looks like they're roaming around it versus some of the other cave paintings in which they're just randomly placed there. But once again, just like the previous cave paintings, all of these you can tell by looking are done in different styles. So it indicates to us that they are probably done by multiple people over different periods of time. And also found in Lascaux from around 16,000 to 14,000 BCE is a painting of a man. I did this on the board last semester, you remember? Was it this class that I did in or the other one? Yeah. Yeah. I told you he looked just like that. I drew it on the board and people were laughing and I was like, this custodian's probably gonna think I lost my mind. But I drew him on the board. He's very easy to draw. So this is a very interesting painting and quite possibly the very first narrative illustration in art history. We don't know what it's illustrating, but it could be illustrating something. There are way, way too many questions about this. This is the only cave painting of a human figure at all. There are no female figures painted. There are no male figures painted. This is the only one. And it was found inside of a deep hole by itself. A little deep, dark hole, all by itself. So you'll notice that we have a rhinoceros here that is pooping. That is done in a different style from the rest of this. So this might be done by someone else. We aren't sure. But a rhinoceros pooping is already a narrative that we've not seen before in any of the other areas. And over here we have a bison. If you're wondering what this is down here, those are his intestines spilling out. So he has been killed. Yes. So also possibly a narrative happening over here. This man with the bird head could have killed him. We don't know. We're not sure. He is falling over. It could have been that he killed the bison and then the bison skewered him with the last bit of his life force. We don't know. Why does the man have a bird head? We don't know. But we can tell it's a man because they made sure to illustrate his prominent penis. So yeah, that's how we know. We also don't know why there's a staff with a bird on it. This could have been like a chief or someone. We don't know. There's a lot of questions with this one. The narrative didn't really help answer the questions. It just, the deeper you were going into this, the more questions that historians end up asking. Like, why? Why do they do this? Versus getting any answers. It's kind of like the,
They get paid.
yeah, like,
They get paid to have.
yeah.
It.
Well,
So.
I mean, if you go into that field, usually you're trying to like learn about people. And when it comes to Paleolithic art, the more you find, it's like the less you know. And it's just going to get worse now. So now we're moving on to Chauvet. Chauvet is the oldest cave paintings ever found. And they are also the most realistic representational images, which is bizarre. They were so realistically representative of the animals that they illustrated that people thought they were fake. Like I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of fakes popping up. And when this was carbon dated, they had to carbon date it a few times because they couldn't believe it. It came up to be so much older than any of the other cave paintings previously found. It was, like I said, the most recently found too. It was found in the 90s. So new, not old. I think I have to pause. Not yet. No, I didn't. It must be on this video then. Okay, we are going to watch a video of this one because there's a lot going on this. A lot. We don't have a flat horizon line happening in this like the olive bulls at Lascaux. They're all randomly placed. but in comparison to the other cave paintings, they're a lot more natural looking. We don't have twisted profile. We don't have entirely profile. We have some shading being used. Cool. You will also recognize animals that you wouldn't think are in France. By the way, Chauvet is in France. So this in particular is what I mean by shading being used. So instead of just drawing a straight line for the shoulder blade of the lion, they did a shadow to indicate the shape, which we hadn't seen in any of the others. You'll also notice figure stacking. They put animals on top of animals to indicate numbers instead of just doing one here, one here, one here, one here. They've overlapped them and overlaid them. That helps to create the idea of depth, which you don't see in Paleolithic art. So we see a lot of techniques being used in the oldest cave painting that you don't see in the newer ones. And a lot of techniques that are forgotten for a very long period of time. Let's see if they show the really cool thing in here. You'll notice there's landscape. You don't see landscapes. So this is really cool for someone that's into Paleolithic art. This is a pretty impressive find. And you can really understand why they didn't believe that it was real. So over here with the rhinos, this is the cool thing. So you'll notice over here, this rhino, he has many, many horns. They did that as a way to indicate motion. So instead of trying to show motion in a different way, they just showed multiple images of that object over and over.
Are the rhinos running down? Are the rhinos like moving in a direction?
Moving in a direction? Maybe.
Yeah.
They kind of look like it.
Yeah.
They kind of look like they're moving and walking. So movement. Yeah, he's throwing his head back. That's what the horn is. They're trying to show the rhino moving its head. And they didn't know what other way to illustrate it, but no one else had tried to do that ever. We'll see. Well, you won't see in this class, but if you're familiar with the futurists, they do the same thing. And that is in the 1900s. And they literally do the same thing to show movement. They show the object over and over again. Yeah, so pretty amazing. For time's sake, I'm going to stop that because I'll just watch the whole thing. So what are some ways that we could summarize Paleolithic art?
The oldest was the most interesting.
Yeah.
And the first one was the most basic.
Kind of, yeah.
This we're losing touch.
Yeah.
It's something happening.
Maybe. Yeah. Weird things happen in art history where it's like we cycle through really realistic and then abstract over and over again. And it's just this continuous circle that keeps happening. And we can already see it starting here. We started off really realistic and then we just went more abstract. And eventually with the Greeks, we'll get more realistic again, and then again, we'll get more abstract. So it's weird how that happens. Anyone else want to try and summarize Paleolithic art? Yes. Yeah, definitely. A lot of them. Yeah. Good. Anyone else?
Humans.
Yeah, we do see some humans. Males being depicted very interestingly, and females also being depicted very interestingly. And a lot of questions. That's a good way to summarize Paleolithic art. A lot of questions. And that takes us into something crazy happening around 9000 BCE, called the Mesolithic era. The Mesolithic era is characterized with stone tools, the domestication of dogs, and large amounts of stored food. So we are now storing our food. And then following this, the Neolithic era begins, and we'll talk about that more on Monday. We're going to kind of start it today, though. It's marked by the agricultural revolution and animal husbandry, meaning livestock. And of course, one of the first areas to exhibit that change is Mesopotamia, which is what Monday's class is dedicated to. Mesopotamia. Domesticated dogs. Have you guys seen that like meme about like the first domesticated dog?
Mhm.
Isn't there a whole movie about it?
Yeah, I think it's funny. You just want food. Okay, so Anatolia and Mesopotamia are, like I said, where the Neolithic era really starts off with the agricultural revolution. We're focusing today over here. On Monday, we're going to be over here where the major hub is happening. But today we're going to take a look at Jericho, Jerusalem, and Engazal. The land in this area was fertile enough, thanks to the rivers that you might see in the lakes and the seaport, to live off of. You didn't need to follow your food. You could grow stuff. There were naturally occurring grains like barley and wheat there that just needed to be bred a little bit to be edible. Original wheat was not edible. And they got plenty of rainfall to grow food and take care of livestock. And that's literally all you need to have a city pop up, which is exactly what happened. The success of smaller villages of people that switched from being nomads to settling down permanently end up eventually leading to large cities. Particularly the largest cities occurred around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which are over here. But we do have some fairly large cities that, if you're familiar with the biblical stories, pop up over here. And we are starting off in Jericho. Anyone heard of Jericho? People that went to Christian school. Us. So it is located along the Jordan River. It began as a really small village and then had a big uptake thanks to a lot of the natural resources in the area and became very wealthy. The wealth ended up leading to them to like have enough manpower and money to develop fortification, particularly walls and towers. Yes, there are real walls. And we know there were walls. The walls were once surrounded by 5 foot thick, 13-foot tall walls. Yeah, it really existed. Holy cow. And it had watchtowers that were 30 feet tall, placed around the fortification. Right here is the remnants of one of the watchtowers. This is our first example of an organized workforce. Were they paid? Were they voluntary? Were they slaves? Who knows? But it's the first example of an organized workforce. It did take a lot of manpower to make these bricks. They needed to make clay bricks. They didn't have like stone in this area. So these are mud-made bricks, which is why a lot of the city, like there's not much of it left because mud melts with rain. But yeah, so it would have taken a lot of manpower to make such a thick fortified city with tall walls like this. For whatever reason, the city was abandoned in 7000 BCE and small settlements popped up around it. We don't know why it was abandoned. Who knows? Who knows why? Yeah. But yeah, Jericho. First example of organized workforce in the Neolithic era. Also found in Jericho after the end of the main city and the smaller settlements around popped up. we see interesting stone masks left behind. They were most likely used as like a burial mask. These people in Jericho, this is so gross. They buried their dead under their floorboards. And the dead would have been like mummified and they had masks over top. And this is one of the masks left behind. It was painted plaster with inlaid shells for the eyes and teeth. It is life size. Yeah. It has to do with their belief in like ancestry and their ancestors protecting them. At least that's what most people believe. So like if you buried your dead ancestors with you, they would protect you.
Yeah, a lot of cultures have
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to see all of them in this class. This is just the first one, but yeah.
This is true.
But
That's what this is.
Yeah. They weren't mummified to the extent as the Egyptians
yeah,
did, but
always
preserved. So they didn't stink up your house at least.
Oh,
And next study is Angazal, in which we've also found some interesting things. Dozens of plaster statues have been found. The statues are a few feet large. So this one's like 3 feet 5 inches tall. And they're all human shaped, obviously still abstract. So in the Neolithic era, we still have a lot of abstraction going on. This is a plaster statue constructed around reeds. So they would make like the skeletal internal system of reeds and then put plaster outside of it. So if you've ever worked with like newspaper plaster kind of things like that.
no.
Yeah. And yeah, that takes us into Europe, which in Europe we don't have like sculptures or paintings or things left behind. We have more what are called megaliths. Megaliths are large stone structures. And this is the first megalith that we're going to look at. The last one we're going to see is Stonehenge, which I'm going to try and wrap up if you don't mind. Anyone mind? If you do mind, you can leave it Stonehenge. You probably know what that looks like. But this is Newgrange. Newgrange is made of corbel vaulting, which is a vocab word. Corbel vaulting is just stacking stones in a way in which gravity and the stone's pressure upon each other will keep things in place. So arches work in the same way. Arches are technically corbel vaults. This megalith, however, is technically underground. So these are really large burial chambers under mounds. They're called tumulus chambers or mounds. So basically you would have your piece of land and then all of a sudden on your land you'd have like this. Well, underneath that mound of dirt would be a cavern that is made of corbel vaulting. That vaulting keeps the dirt from caving in. So that's the structure of this complex. It is a 62-foot long passageway that you can travel through, and it does have, like I said, a dome of dirt over top. So 62 feet long of these stones, and these stones are several tons. 62 feet long, just to bury some people. We'll talk about that in a second with Stonehenge. Those are also very large stones. And I forgot about Hagar Kim. Hagar Kim is another megalith structure of large stones. With this one, there are a lot of horizontal rows of stacked large stones in semicircular apse-like shapes. Apse are things that are invented in Roman times as churches. These were not churches, however. They were, well, technically they were possibly churches. They're temples. We found votive statues inside of this. So possibly a temple-like church. And of course, that takes us to the last one and the most famous one, Stonehenge. Stonehenge uses a simple post and lintel construction. Posts are the ones that go like this, lintel, this, post, lintel. And of course, once again, very heavy stones. These large stones in the outer circle range from 40 to 50 tons. And how they would move these is you would get thick trees, cut them, remove all of the branches, and create a roller system of trees to push the stones on. So that's how they did this, rolled them. Did it take a lot of time? Heck yes. This is 100 feet in diameter. If you are wondering how big Stonehenge is, there is an inner and an outer circle. The inner circle is made of bluestones. They are volcanic stones from a very long ways away. They did not come from nearby at all. And then the outer stone is white stones. They weren't from as far away. And of course, the most important stone is the heel stone, which you'll see in the video in a second. Well, it's not really a video, it's a 360 view. And that heel stone marks the sunrise for the summer solstice, which leads a lot of people to believe that this has to do with the summer or winter solstice. It could have been a calendar. It was at one point used as a cremation site. We know that because we found ashes of things. So. Yeah, and it could have been used as a location to observe astrology. So that too. I will come back to this video though, because I know people have other stuff they need to do. And this will just be for someone if they want to stick around. So we all know what Stonehenge looks like. Now, can we summarize Neolithic art?
Yeah.
We have construction happening, finally. That's the main summary. There's construction going on in different areas of the world simultaneously. And just a reminder, for your assignment, you do need to pick one artwork from chapter 1 and analyze the piece. You can stick around and do that in here if you want to. I'm not going anywhere. Or you can leave, I don't care. And it is a discussion post format. This is once again, just for me, it's a check for understanding for me to make sure you know how to analyze something. And next week we are starting off on Monday with Mesopotamia. So look forward to that. I'm looking forward to it. So, for anyone that wants to work in here, you can. And for anyone that wants to stick around and see the 360 view video of Stonehenge, you can. It's going to be fun. Other than that, if you want to leave, you're free to leave. Have a great weekend.
You know that there's also one at UCCB, like to scale.
No, it's not just, well, like it's a replica, just a downsized version.
Yeah.
Very, very downsized.
Let's make it full size.
Yeah.
I agree.
83 stones are visible today. These are a combination of two types of stone. The larger sarsen stones, which most archaeologists believe were brought from the Marble Downs 20 miles away, each weigh around 25 tons. The smaller blue stones came from the Brazili Hills in southwest Wales and weigh between 2 and 5 tons. This view is of the northeast entrance to the circle as you approach it from the avenue. It's one of the two original entrances to Stonehenge. The heel stone is the large stone, stands where the avenue leading to the circle meets the earthwork enclosure around it. Viewed from the centre of the circle, the sun rises by the heel stone during the summer solstice, and during the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the sun sets between the stones. So
Oh, you're not going to let me
tallest
do that in full
the name
screen?
of the two
Okay.
upright stones, topped
It
with
moves,
horizontal
but
lintel.
evidently in full screen I can't do that.
The altar stone lies within the inner horseshoe of stones. Unlike the other stones, it is calcareous sandstone and is probably from South Wales. It sits beneath the fallen upright of the tallest trilithon. It is thought to have been named altar stone by the 17th century architect Inigo Jones, although it is not known if it actually once stood upright. This sarsen stone is known as the slaughter stone. The idea that the stone was used for sacrifices seems to have been started by an anonymous writer who referred to it in 1776 as a table upon which victims were dissected and prepared. In reality, it originally stood upright and was one of 2 or 3 stones that formed part of the northeast entrance to the circle. There are hundreds of round barrows in the area around Stonehenge. Each earth mound usually covers 1 or more graves and is surrounded by a circular ditch. Many of the barrows have different phases of construction, but they were mostly built in the early Bronze Age. There are numerous examples of graffiti on the stones, dating from the Georgian and Victorian periods, many of them initials and surnames. This carving of Wren is attributed to the acclaimed architect Sir Christopher Wren, who lived from 1632 to 1723. Stonehenge has captured people's imaginations for thousands of years, and the story of the stones continues to enthrall visitors to this day.
That was it. It's a short video. So yeah, Monday, Mesopotamia. I will see you all then. Bye.